everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and in this video we are going to be kicking off the playthrough with part number 1 of Dawnshade, the Watcher's Prophecy from Highborne Games. In this particular series of videos, we're going to be playing through using the character Ash Windstrider, and we're also going to be doing this in a solo mode capacity so you can see how this game plays controlling just a single character. Now, if you haven't seen my setup video for Dawnshade already, you'll want to check the link in the top right-hand corner that'll take you to that video to help you understand how we got to where we currently are right now. And there are 2 things additional to solo mode play you're going to want to be aware of in terms of setup. We're going to go over those right now. It's important to note that as part of setup, I should have placed a dark cube in the cutout section in the very middle of the Vaki mat at the top where it states balanced. The reason for this is that all elements inside of the game, all 6 of them, as you can see around the Vaki mat, are all on the very first position of their trackers. All the cubes are in the exact same position, so in essence, all elements are in balance. And we'll certainly be talking more about the statuses that these elements can be in. As you can see at the bottom of the mat, it states unaligned. So it appears there are 2 major statuses for these elements. However, there is a third, and this is going to likely change in the final version in terms of a place to put the cube, but there is a balanced state, there is an aligned state, and there's an unaligned state. We'll talk about all of those when we go through the playthrough. The final correction that involves the Vaki mat has to do with the 6 elemental areas here that all have colored disc inside of them called Vaki, and the number of these currently right now for a solo player like myself controlling a single character is incorrect. This is the amount you'd have if you as a solo player were controlling all 4 characters, or you actually had 4 individuals around the table, each controlling a single character. How these scale is essentially Tier 1, which is the yellow, blue, and red piles, that is sun, water, and mountain, should each have 2 Vaki inside of them per character that you're controlling. So in this case, those are going to need to be scaled down quite a bit. Just like that, all of our Tier 1 elements have now been scaled down to match the fact we're using 1 character during this playthrough. Tier 2 now, which is the green pile, orange pile, and purple pile, which is nature, fire, and air respectively, all need to drop down to a single Vaki each. And just like that, we've now scaled this Vaki mat correctly for the number of characters we're controlling. We're about ready to begin our adventure, but first we'll take the character chip, which is right here, and we're going to place the number of HP as indicated right here underneath of that chip. So that'll be 3 health in this case. Our character's chip stack is all set up with 3 health placed underneath the character chip. We begin our adventure in chapter number 1, the starting village, the Galeswood Forest. The clarion call of the gale horn sweeps through the village like a sharp wind before a storm. The High Elders gather the village together. Petarukin have an uncanny sense of bad news, and there is talk of dire threats facing not just the Galeswood Forest, but all of Dawnshade. In the air above the crowd is Eldris Dael, arms outstretched and gliding gracefully to the center of town. Her patagum, the thin flap of skin that stretches from a Petarukin's wrist to their waist, ripples as she lands. She raises her crooked staff in the air and the crowd silences. For someone so old and small, she speaks in a way that penetrates the soul like a gong. In the Tome of Excellent we read, "With order and strength there the watchers will be, made bare their hand and none shall flee. Though great the price, yet worth the cost, made free in balance or all is lost." She lets the words linger as she plants her staff in the fertile soil underfoot, then continues. The Watcher's Prophecy is nigh. Unity and might forces threaten the fragile balance of Dawnshade, and we must not stand idle, watching as the world shatters around us. We will form a kinship to escort and protect Kimber, for she is the one chosen to restore balance, proffers the Eldris. Kimber is called forward, an orphan you've known since you were younglings. Her crystalline blue eyes and flaxen fur shimmer in the glow of Dawnshade's two suns. The crowd murmurs, looking at her fragile form, but she smiles and steps forward bravely. Next called is Flash, an apprentice to the gunsmith and Deadeye with her boom shot. She approaches, pinching her braids nervously. Then Poltum, a runes weaver in the Galeswood temple, is called. He grins, swinging his staff in a show that leaves trails of crackling purple airvaki as he walks. He is followed by Wisp, a former captain of the guard turned gravemender after losing her leg in conflict. She steps dutifully forward, nodding to the Eldris Dale. Then finally Ash, the son of the blacksmith resident show-off, is called. Ash tries twirling his sword in his hand but nearly drops it. Others are called forward to join the kinship. Eldris Dale raises both hands to hush the crowd. She addresses the kinship. Alone, you are like a branch easily broken. Together are like a tree strong and mighty. Watchers guide you on your path. The villagers cheer. You look around and think you may be doomed if this is the best the High Elders can do, yourself included. A hat is passed around by the villagers to raise funds for the kinship. Your quest begins. Gain 3 training points and visit the guild hall. Also, gain rewards 2 XP and 5 tawny. With our quests beginning, we know we gained 3 training points, so we're going to go ahead and place 3 black cubes in the training point position on the Vaki map. The 3 training points are in position, and we'll certainly be spending those before we begin our adventure. We also receive 5 tawny, as indicated by the quest log. And we'll also gain 2 XP, which we'll use this marker to track as well. Note that once the XP tracker gets to 10, then we gain a level. And when we gain a level, we add a training point cube to the training point area. This is how we can obtain more of these points during our journey. Now we're going to visit the guild hall at the starting village, and when we choose to go ahead and interact with the guild hall, the benefit that comes from that is being able to, as a player, spend training points, which we now have 3 of, to either increase our character's stats by 1 or unlock one of our character's skill dice for each training point spent. We'll talk about each of those right now. One of the areas that you can spend your training points in is stats on your character playmat. You can see here there are cogs or gears that are tracking those stats. We have things like agility, devotion, attack, defense, HP, and items. I'm going to quickly talk about what each of those do without diving into them too deeply until we actually start using them. Agility is the total number of dice you may roll. Devotion is the number of Vaki dice or yellow dice that you may roll. Attack is the number of attack dice you may roll. These are red. Defense is the number of defense dice you may roll. These are blue. HP is the total number of hit points you may have. And as you can see from the beginning, we already set ourselves up with the default starting value of 3, which is circled. Again, all these stats have a circled stat, which we begin at. The item stat is the number of items you can actually carry. The other things you're able to spend your training points are ability cards in relation to the characters you're controlling. So you can see here I've got all of Ash's cards in front of me here. These are tier 1 abilities across the top and tier 2 across the bottom. It's important to note that this one right here labeled as tier number 1 is actually a tier 2 ability and was just misprinted in the prototype. So keep that in mind. But of course, in the final version, that will be corrected. And again, all of these are prototype subject to change, as is everything inside of this playthrough. Now, the important thing to note with these particular abilities is not only the type of Vaki it takes to have on your player board or to obtain that has to match what is on the ability card, you also get to unlock the die. So if I choose to spend a training point to grab, say, this one right here, which I'm actually eyeing, it's called Dawn Strike, then I automatically unlock this particular die, which is one of 3 available dice I have for my character Ash. That will then go onto my player board. It's called Blade Rigor. And then in order to activate this ability, I need to have 2 of this sun element and 1 of the mountain in order to trigger it. So I'm going to go go ahead and actually choose to train up this ability. Of course, it's going to cost me one of the training points, which I will discard after we go through this rundown of the card. You'll notice on the card it mentions what this thing is all about. The key is at the very bottom there. It says the Blade Rigger die, which is this die right here, is now unlocked. I'll be placing this on my player board, and it says when I roll this, I'm going to get the damage. Damage is from the pips that you see on the die. We'll see more about that during battle. And then I also get the mended condition put on myself, and that's really going to help me with healing, which is great when you're playing solo. So as you can see over there in the training points area, we're down to 2 training points. The one I spent is now just off of the Vaki mat to the side on the far right. I've unlocked one of the 3 skill dice, the 3 skill dice I had sitting right here specific to my character. This one right here is Blade Rigger, so this die is going to sit right here. And this ability card that I've unlocked can just sit anywhere near my character board to remind me of what I can potentially do with this thing in the future. Now, I'm juggling a bunch of different thoughts here in terms of the stats that I want to train up. I do have 2 more training points to go. I really want to bump up my attack. It's currently at 1. So again, to remind you how this works is when we go into battle, the agility amount is how many dice you can roll all at once during that turn. So I'm currently at 3. Well, I'm only rolling 1 attack die right now, 1 defensive die, and 1 devotion die. That's pretty much all I've got. But now I've also got my actual ability die in there as well. So I could ramp up my agility if I wanted to be able to have more, to be able to roll all of those dice during a battle, or if I wanted to make sure I could do more damage on the attack side of things, I could start focusing there, or maybe even bump up my HP or how many items I want to carry. There's honestly so many different combinations to choose from here, but I think being that I want to be a little bit more on the aggressive side of things with Ash, I'm going to bump up my attack. So my attack is now in the 2nd position, meaning I can now roll up to 2 attack dice when I make a roll, which is pretty awesome. The other thing I'd like to do to make my character a little bit stronger when battles come around is I'm going to bump up my HP with the 3rd training point. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and moved my tracker from 3 to 4, and right now I can go ahead and just grab the stack and I can add that health chip in, so now my character can handle a little bit more pain in the future. And of course, we just spent those 2 training points, so they can be removed as well. Now we're going to start off our first turn of Dawnshade. We're going to go over the phases, and I'll talk about them as we actually hit them. The very first phase is moving the active player token. You can see the yellow token on Ash here. So really, how this token works is when you're playing the game solo with 1 character, it's going to sit on Ash the entire time. So this particular phase, one of 5 different phases in a turn, is completely irrelevant when only controlling 1 character. However, if you are playing solo and you're controlling multiple characters, you will be moving this active player token throughout the characters you're controlling in a clockwise fashion or left to right fashion as you go through not only the turns but also battles. That's important to note. So that is certainly going to lighten the amount of phases if you're playing solo with a single character, as 1 phase has already been resolved automatically and will never need to be resolved ever again. You will move now to the 2nd phase, which is moving the kinship. Now your options when moving the kinship is you can move to a new quest tile from the top of the quest deck by simply just moving the kinship marker down a path from a tile you're currently on. So for instance, we are at the village right now, and if I lift this kinship token, you'll notice that we've got 2 paths or 2 options we can move to. I cannot go to any of these other areas because there's no trail leading to them. So I have to make a decision as to which way I want to go. And honestly, as you can see, the pattern for solo has 3 on one side, 3 on the opposite, and they mirror each other. There isn't really too much of a pull either way, but I am going to probably have the kinship move down here to this location. And by choosing to do this as part of phase number 2, we now go ahead and grab a quest tile from the quest tile deck, flip it over and reveal it. And at this point in time, we have to place this to ensure that paths connect. So as long as we have a connection between the tile we're placing and the tile we came from, then it is a legal placement. So I could do it like this. I could do it like this. There's actually a number of ways I could make this work, and it really just hinges on what your plan is in terms of where are you trying to get to. Something else to note on this particular board is a lot of these tokens along the board that are called Watchers tokens. And as soon as we move into those spaces, not only are we exploring into that space and flip a tile over, we also flip that Watcher's Blessing over and the active player gains it. Again, being that Ash is the only active player, I'm going to gain everything, which is pretty awesome. So overall, I'm pretty happy with placing that new tile just like this. It's going to allow me access to this Watcher's Blessing over here at some point, which will be pretty awesome to flip that over and gain it if I can get there. For now, the kinship marker is moving from the village, as I already showed you guys, to this location, and we go to phase number 3, which is all about increasing threat, and it really hinges on how much the kinship moved on this quest mat. So for every space or tile that it transitions through, you are going to be hit with a threat, and threat ties back to really triggering the end game condition. So on the Vaki mat in the middle, we have a red chip, and that chip is signifying how much threat we currently have at this point in time. Because we chose to just move one space, we're going to go ahead and increase our threat once. Now later on, once this quest mat really fills out and there's lots of options for movement around, we may end up bouncing a couple spaces to a location we want to get to, and that's going to cost us more threat. Again, going back to the endgame condition, depending on the difficulty level that you've chosen to play your particular game in, you're going to have a certain number of threat or a threshold, and once you hit that threshold, you're going to be forced into the final confrontation. If you're playing on easy mode, you have 19 threat before that triggers. The only other way that could trigger early is if you happen to run through your entire quest tile deck that you've accumulated and put together earlier during setup. So there's two ways that that end game trigger can happen in terms of the final threat or the final showdown occurring for the particular chapter that you're in. If you're playing on normal difficulty, you have 16 threat before that triggers, or again, if your quest tile deck happens to run out, that's also going to trigger the end game. And if you're really up for a challenge, you can choose hard, where you only have 13 threat. And again, all this is doing is crunching down how much time you have to get prepared to deal with this final confrontation. So I'm going to strike a balance in terms of the difficulty for my playthrough here that you're watching as being a normal difficulty. So I'm going to set at 16 threat. That is going to be my threshold. If I hit that, we're going to be pushed into the major threat or the final confrontation of chapter number 1. Or if I happen to explore so much that I run out of every single tile from this quest deck, the very last one will have the major threat revealed and will be thrusted into that battle, ready or not. So that's going to complete phase number 3, and now we're going to move into phase 4, which is all about completing the quest tile that you're now sitting on. And in this particular case, we are on event 19. We need to go to the logbook in order to determine what this event has for us. The air turns chill, and you can see your breath as you enter the snowy, spire-lined mountains of Dawnshade's highlands. A dwelling made of ice and snow sits atop a hill ahead of you, on the other side of an icy pond. Near the house, a Vaki portal pulses and swirls with purple air Vaki. Your limbs are tired, and it has been too many cog cycles since your last meal. Let's make camp and investigate at dawn, suggests Flash. Though I'd sleep with a mask if I were you. I'm still scarred from seeing Potlum sleeping without his pants. Potlum's ears perk up at hearing his name. Hey, you should be thanking me. Only a precious few have witnessed the splendor of Dawnshade's fourth moon. Now we have a choice to make in this event 19. We have 3 options. Investigate the dwelling is 1. Investigate the portal that we saw is 2. Or the third one is make camp. Now when I'm looking through these, the one about making camp doesn't seem like a good idea just yet, being that we're not really all that beat up or tired. It's very early into our adventure, so I think investigating things sounds like a little more fun. We could investigate the dwelling, or we could investigate the portal. I'm kind of hoping that if we investigate the dwelling, that I'll be able to get an item. That's at least my thought process anyway in terms of choosing that one. We do have, based on our stats for Ash, the availability to carry 1 item. So I'm going to go with that hope. We'll see if it pans out. Potlum taps on the dwelling's door, hoping not to break it. It is surprisingly sturdy considering its building material. A creature coated in fur with multicolored ribbons and beads in his wizened silver hair answers the door and invites you in. The dwelling is cozy and warm. Your host shuffles to some chairs by a burning fire that strangely does not seem to be melting the ice hearth surrounding it. By the way he is using his rune-covered walking stick to guide his steps, you surmise he is blind. Please, sit. You must be weary from your travels. I'm Tyndall Hornsquire. I live here with my daughter. A youngling enters the room with a cogbot trailing behind with a tray of hot drinks. You graciously accept and spend some time getting acquainted. You share stories of your travels and the purpose of your quest as you let the heat of the fire warm your fur. I've heard rumors of a band of Petarukin putting a wrench in the cogs of the mighty and Unity. Tyndall offers, staring blankly ahead. My life mate and I join the Unity. She's still with them. I used to be a priest until I lost my sight due to Vaki extraction experiments we had no business doing. Maybe the Watchers are punishing me, but I can now see things I could not with my old eyes. Here, let me show you. Now at this point in the narrative, it's stating that I need to roll the Dawnshade dice. And this is kind of like a check system within the game to see whether or not we're in alignment. And in order to get a success on this, we take the Dawnshade dice, which have two sides. One is dawn and one is night. And if I roll them and they land like so, where I have one of each, I'm in alignment. If I happen to get two dawn sides, I'm unaligned and I fail. So we're hoping to see a dawn and we're hoping to see a dusk or a night side of these dice. And look at that, it happened to roll right off the screen, so you probably don't believe me, but that was a success. Tyndall lifts his walking stick into the air and the runes on its shaft begin glowing with blue water Vaki. Flakes of snow begin to fall from the roof like 1,000 sparkling icicles, but they are not cold to the touch. You feel a calming energy flow into you, heightening your perception and awareness. Gain accurate, that is a condition, so that's kind of nice, plus a tier 1 Vaki of your choice. Now, as you can see here, these are called conditions. We just gained one. It was called accurate, and it is a positive condition, which is why it has the positive on that side, because each of these conditions, as you can see by their color, align with the elements on the Vaki mat. That's right. So not only can you gain these conditions through quest events like this, you can also, if you happen to have Vaki on your mat, which is separate from the Vaki mat of your character, and you happen to spend that Vaki colored token back to the Vaki mat, you get to obtain the condition that actually correlates in terms of its color. Now we're going to see this later on in the playthrough as I'm going to attempt to try and pull it off myself, or at least go in that direction to show you. But you can see right here I've got 6 different conditions in front of me, all on the positive side up. We know we just gained accurate, so we're going to take that one away. But I quickly want to show you on the opposite side of each of these is a negative condition. These are the kinds of things that are going to be thrown your way when battles come around as well. Some of the enemies are going to do these types of things to you, blind you, curse you, subdue you, slow you, and make you imprecise, and the opposite of accurate is stun. So there's just as many negative conditions as there are positive ones here. Now we just gained accurate as a result of ending off that event, so I'm going to place the accurate token, plus that up of course, because, well, I want the positive side. It's going to be sitting right on top of my character chip stack, and this is going to follow me around until we actually move into a battle, which is pretty awesome because the accurate is going to give me the ability to reroll all misses once, and you'll see how valuable that is when we actually get to a battle. Now I quickly want to talk about what I explained in terms of spending Vaki from your mat and then bring it back to the Vaki mat in order to obtain positive conditions. So there is elements inside the game, as you just noted in the story here, where it says gain 1 Vaki. So we would actually go to this Vaki mat over here, and from any one of these tier 1 levels, I can take 1 Vaki. So that's going to allow me to take one from either water, sun, or mountain. That's blue, yellow, or red. Now, in terms of my special ability, things that I need to gain or would like to gain, I need to have 2 from the sun element and 1 from the mountain in order to power this ability in the future. So it makes sense for me to go after those particular ones. So because we need 2 of the sun, I'm just going to go straight up after the sun one. So I'll take 1 of the Vaki from this, and we're going to drop it in my tier 1 section like so. Now that it's on my mat, at any point in time on my turn, I can spend that Vaki by putting it back on the Vaki mat. The really interesting thing with this is if I decided to do this, I can put it back here. The alignment marker on the Vaki mat tips up 1. Now I am no longer balanced in terms of all the elements. As you can see, the sun is actually greatly more, I'm more aligned with the sun than I am with anything else. So what ends up happening is this cube is no longer going to sit in the balance position. It comes off the mat, and it's not considered unaligned though. So it doesn't go down into this unaligned position. It goes into the third position technically that isn't actually a part of this mat just yet, but in the future may likely be a spot for it. And that's called the aligned position. And that essentially just means you're strongly aligned with one of the 6 elements. And that for me is the sun. So there are 2 reasons to do this type of action where you go ahead and spend Vaki from your player board, place it back into the Vaki mat, which is considered spending it. And when you do so, you're going to uptick the tracker based on the Vaki that you've moved over. And you're going to obtain, this is where it ties back to conditions that we just talked about, the positive condition that has the exact same color. So in this case, focused is the positive side of the yellow sun element. So I'm going to gain focused. This is one of the major reasons for doing this versus keeping it on my player board and then saving up to eventually be able to power my ability. I went ahead and I foregoed that by actually spending it on the Vaki mat to gain this condition, which I still think is pretty awesome, and we'll talk more about what that does when we hit a battle. But I could have just as easily decided to keep the Vaki in my tier 1 section here of the sun and just leave it there. Again, you can spend it at any time. So that's pretty awesome. The other reason that it's interesting to spend Vaki from your player board back to the Vaki mat is that you get to impact that tracker that's going around those elements. So as you saw, when I put it back, the tracker of the sun went up by 1. This caused me to become, or I'm no longer, the elements at least, balanced. So that cube left the balance slot. It's now considered that I'm in alignment with the sun. So that's the reason why I'm not balanced, and I'm also not aligned. Now, how do you become unaligned? Well, that's an interesting one. So an unaligned is the same process we just went through. Let's say hypothetically that I had gained, say, a blue water. And I went ahead and I did the exact same thing. I want to take advantage of the condition I could gain. Now this would be a bad example because I already have accurate. So let's just go ahead and say it's the mountain that I'm going after because I want to go for the red condition, which is a positive, which is mended, right? So I go ahead and I spend this Vaki from Ash's tier 1 mountain slot. Sorry, it's down here. And it goes back to the mountain over here. And when I do that, this will go up by 1. So what's happened now? Now on the Vaki mat, there's nothing that I'm actually more aligned than anything else. I don't have a single element that I'm aligned with anymore. So I am now truly unaligned. And that's where the black cube would actually go into this bottom position down here. The reason why it matters whether you're balanced or unaligned is at the end of the game and also throughout the game, there will be times where it'll ask you whether or not you're balanced or unaligned or aligned, and you'll have benefits and you'll also have potentially some negatives that could come along with that, and in terms of your own success with the chapters, that can matter as well. So with all that said, I've reset everything back except for the fact that, remember, as part of the event number 19, I got to gain a tier 1 Vaki. I chose the sun. I placed that sun Vaki on my player board. Then I spent it immediately by placing it back on the Vaki mat in the sun position. So there is 2 back here on this one right here, which might be difficult to see. And I did uptick the tracker as well. We removed the fact that because of the uptick on that tracker, I'm more aligned with the sun now, which means I'm no longer balanced across all 6. And I gain that focus condition because focus is yellow, and that is the element that I upticked when I spent it. So that's pretty cool. Now, the other thing to make mention of is the fact that if you happen to work towards becoming balanced again, so in other words, right now I'm considered aligned, because remember there's 3 statuses: balanced, unaligned, and then aligned just means there's no actual square on the mat whatsoever. If I can ever work my way back to being balanced, you'll note right underneath the balancer says +1 Vaki. So you actually gain a Vaki if you can somehow get back to a spot where you're balanced, which means every single one of these trackers have to be the exact same position. The logbook notes that for completing event 19, we also get 6 XP and 2 tawny because we succeeded. So we'll come over here to our XP tracker, which is at 2. We're going to tick this all the way up to 8. Remember, once we hit 10, then we get to level up. We get to go from level 0 to level 1 and gain a training point, which is exciting. We're now also going to gain 2 tawny, and we might as well talk about currency really quickly in terms of the ones you're going to see at least right away. And that is, if we gain 2 and we have 7, we might as well just keep 2 tawny, and then we'll go ahead and actually grab ourselves a glint, which is worth 5. So now we have a total of 7. And that rewards portion that you just saw in terms of gaining 6 XP and the 2 tawny, that is phase number 5. And that's it. That is the run of a turn for the overarching game. Now, we haven't seen a battle yet, and there's lots of back and forth with the battles, but that is the structure of the main game. So we got some choices here. As you can see, the paths are leading in multiple places, so we can technically head to 14, we could head to 19, we could head right here to a Watcher's Blessing. So I feel like that's a good idea, seeing as it's going to give us an immediate benefit. So let's go ahead and move our kinship to this location right here. We're going to flip over a quest tile. And what do we got? Oh, look at that. We got ourselves a Watcher's Temple. So we'll go ahead and connect that in because really there's only one way to do it. And it comes to a dead end anyway, so that's perfect. Flipping this over, we gain the Watcher's Blessing is a shield. That's nice. So this is going to allow us the ability during a battle to bump up shields, which is a blue chip that will sit at the bottom of our stack. And of course, it's going to stop damage from hitting our HP. That's huge. Kinship marker will sit here, and we did just move 1 space. So our threat is going to uptick by 1. We'll go ahead and uptick our threat to 2. So now we're going to resolve our quest tile, which is the Watcher's Temple. Now, when you enter a Watcher's Temple, each player is granted the positive condition associated with the Watcher you are aligned with on the Vaki mat. So this is very important based on what we just talked about. I'm aligned more so with the sun right now. So ironically, because I spent a Vaki from my player mat in order to uptick the tracker and gain a positive condition, which was focused from the sun, which made me more or truly aligned to the sun. Now moving to the Watcher's Temple, I ironically gain the exact same condition that I already paid for. So unfortunately, you cannot have more than one of the same condition. So just in terms of timing, that didn't work out all that great for me. However, it was still perfect in terms of showing you guys how the Vodki mat operates. So a strategy you could employ in the future when we leave the Watcher's Temple, and then eventually, if we want to come back to it, we can make sure in the future when we come back to it that we're aligned more so in one of the elements that we don't already have a positive condition for, so we can actually take full advantage of the Watcher's Temple. So again, you learn this type of strategy as you play the game more and more. So you're probably curious, well, what if you're not fully aligned to just one element like you are? Well, that's a good question. If I hadn't gone ahead and spent the Vodki from my player board in order to align myself more so with the sun, I would have actually been in a balanced state. And if I was in a balanced state or an unaligned state in terms of the elements, then I'd actually be resolving the Watcher's Tower in a completely different way. I'll let you find out more about that on your own. So after the kinship has completed their time at the Watcher's Temple, the kinship now earns 8 XP. We currently sit at 8 XP already, so an additional 8 would bring us to 16. But remember, at every 10, we level up. So we'll actually be resetting this 8 to a 6, and then we'll go to the level up. We're going to bump ourselves up to 1, which will also give us a training point in the training point area here. So now, if we happen to be able to get back to a village, the starting village that is, or if you happen to find an outpost that has a guild hall, then you can also do training there as well. So that's where you can see how that threat, in terms of moving around once you've revealed multiple quest tiles, can get quite interesting. Do you really want to rush back to your starting village so you can visit the guild hall and train up? But also remembering full well that as you rush back, you are increasing your threat, which is pushing you closer to the end game. But if you don't get back there and train, you're not taking advantage of the training points that you've earned. All right, let's continue our journey here with a brand new turn. So I'm going to go ahead and probably have, seeing it, we're at a dead end at this point. We've moved all the way to that far side. The unfortunate thing with the pass is it's actually blocked me from going up here and grabbing these. So I almost have to kind of head back and reverse my entire plan. So what I'm going to do is actually have the kinship move one back to this location, and then we're going to go to here. So that is going to be a 2 threat movement. So threat is going to go from 2 up to 4. Now, there might be some of you that are wondering, well, you just mentioned the village. How come you spent 2 to not go back to the village? You could have made it there with that 2 threat cost you just paid. And yes, I could have. I could have moved there, paid that threat cost, and been able to train up that 1 point. However, for me, just a single point is not worth me going there. So I would much rather maybe get it up to 2 training points before I go back to the starting village and train up. So let's go ahead and explore this location that I'm at right now. So let's grab a new quest tile, flip it over. Ah, look at this. We got ourselves a cool looking village. So event number 8. This one has 4 paths coming out from it, so it's kind of interesting. Again, I can't from this location, unfortunately, get back to the village quickly. I have to kind of go the long way around because of this cliff edge here. So I could place this like this. That would work. It gave me options here, 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 and back where I came from, which works. However, it's not giving me an option easily to get to this, which is slightly worrisome. I could change this orientation around like this. I would just have a dead end with this row, which I don't necessarily like either, because as you saw with this Watcher's Temple, it is possible to get these dead ends. And if you hit them in the wrong spots, you can cut yourself off from ever seeing a particular Watcher's Blessing, which would be bad. So how do I want to go about this? I could do it like this, but I also don't like that I don't have complete freedom to wrap around. So maybe, because I'll probably end up coming around to try to get this one. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet, so I'm just going to go like this, because I think that makes the most sense. And if I want to wrap around to this one, I will, because I'll be heading down this way anyway for one. So what's the difference between another one? Actually, you know what? The more I think about this, I think it does make sense to do this because it's a less of a path. If I end up here, then I can kind of go 1, 2, 3 back to the village versus being here and having to go 1, 2, 3, 4 back to the village. So yeah, we'll stick with that. Event number 8 is all about an abandoned village. You enter a village that appears lifeless, other than a few wandering sandhogs that look like they've gone without food for too many sun cycles. The streets are abandoned. Over here, Flash calls the kinship to a pen full of sandhog bones. These creatures were not killed by predators, she says, covering her nose and waving off buzzing scutterflies. They starved to death. You see a mercantile, an armory, and what appears to be a prison of some sort. You cautiously decide to search for something useful, and we have 3 options here. We can go to the armory, we can go to the mercantile, or we can go to the prison. And really, we're trying to search in any one of these 3 locations. I honestly want to search all of them, but I have to pick just one. I think that I'm still gunning big time for that item. At least I think I am. So I'm going to probably go to the mercantile and hope that there's an item there that we can grab. You enter the merchant shop and spot something shiny in the back corner. Roll the Dawnshade dice. Ha! I knew it! I knew something good was bound to be inside this store, so hopefully this pans out for me. Come on, we want to see 1 of each. Yep, got it. That's perfect. Finders keepers, Potlum declares. Not if I get there first, shouts Wisp, rushing to the back with the rest of the kinship in hot pursuit. Play Loot Shoot for 1 item. Now it's time to check out Loot Shoot with 1 item as it mentioned, and this is one of many dexterity games inside of Dawnshade, and the rules are tweaked for solo mode versus when you're playing with other people around the table. However, you'll always still be challenged by these dexterity games throughout gameplay, and it's not the main way of playing Dawnshade, but there's these games or mini games within the world itself that you'll have to succeed at in order to gain or get advantages out of them. So this particular one called Loot Shoot has you going ahead and drawing a single card from the loot deck, placing it in the middle of this battle mat here. We're going to take our character chip and we're going to be flipping our character chip into the center of the mat, but there's a little bit more to it than that. So I've gone ahead and drawn the very first card off the top of the tier 1 item deck to represent the item from the merchant shop, and it is the Lesser Vaki Portal. You can buy this in a shop if we ever find one for 3 tawny, or if we own it and we want to sell it, we can sell it for 2 tawny. But right now we're trying to get it for free. The aim of the game is essentially to flip your character chip into the center area of this mat. The goal here is the perimeter ring around the item itself. But in solo mode, the dexterity challenge changes a bit and you get the width of a chip around as well in order to be successful. So I have a little bit wider of a radius, so we probably have a radius of about this wide around the card in a circular fashion to land it in, and we'll have to measure it out with another chip once I do the flip. If I was playing with other players, everyone would be trying to flip their character chip into the middle, and whoever's the closest to just this ring perimeter, not with the additional chip radius, would be the one that gets it. So it's a little tougher. So here in solo mode, we're going to try to see whether we can pull this off. I can tell you right now, I've practiced this a couple times already, and I was able to stick it like once or twice really nice, and the other times were so bad the chip went rolling off the table, or I didn't even get it onto the mat because it went straight up and straight down. The only rule you have to remember is the fact your hand cannot go over top of the battle mat. So basically the perimeter of the battle mat is kind of like an invisible force field. You cannot put your hand or have your hand even remotely in there. You can have it back behind it, no problem. You can have it up high as long as you're not actually over top of the battle mat. So here we go. Let's see how this goes. See, that was pretty bad. That was really bad. It wasn't even a flip. You can see how it like slipped out of my hand. That was a little bit better, a little bit more of a flip, but you can see how difficult that truly is. So I'm going to give you a couple examples here. There you go. So I finally got it. Now that I've done a number of practice shots, you saw that over time I got progressively better. We're going to go for it right now. This is going to be the one that counts no matter what happens. So hopefully I can stick it as well as I just did. Oh, I don't know if that's going to be enough. That I think I'm a little shy. So it's hard here because the ring goes underneath. But if I'm gauging it based on the spacing, yeah, see, that's still valid. I think I still got it. Yeah, I definitely got it. Just barely. So that's pretty awesome. So we're going to gain that item, and the good news is I only have 1 item slot, so I get to pop that right in. So in addition to gaining from the merchant shop the Lesser Vaki Portal, which is certainly going to help me with movement and keeping my threat low, we also go to the rewards section of this event, and it says if we succeed, which we did, we gain 6 XP and 2 tawny. Now if we had failed it, we still gain some rewards, but it's not as good as if we had. So 6 XP will take us from the 6 XP we're at up to 12, so we'll reduce things back down to 2, cash in 10 in order to level up to level 2, which is going to give us an additional training point in the training points pool, which is pretty tempting now to head back to the starting village. And as mentioned, we gain 2 more tawny. And that's going to wrap up part number 1. We've learned a lot about how much of the major game mechanics work. We haven't seen a battle yet, but we know based on the structure of the quest tiles that we set up, there are a number of other things we're going to run into in the near future, especially battles. So hopefully I'll see you again in the next episode as we dive further into Dawnshade and what it has in store for us. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.